Peter Rabbit's Kindness Adventure. In a green meadow near a little farmhouse lived Peter Rabbit. Peter was quick, playful, and always hopping into trouble. But deep inside, he had a kind heart. One sunny morning, Peter was gathering carrots for his family when he heard a tiny squeak near the old oak tree. "Help! Help!" cried a little mouse. Peter hurried over and saw the mouse trapped under a fallen branch after a windy night. "Don't worry," said Peter gently. "I'll help you." Peter pushed and pushed with all his strength until the branch rolled away. The little mouse was free at last. "Thank you, Peter," said the mouse happily. "You saved me." Peter smiled. Kindness makes everyone stronger. As Peter continued through the meadow, he noticed a family of birds searching for food. The storm had blown their seeds away. Peter shared the carrots and berries he had collected. "You need these more than I do," he said. The birds chirped with joy. Later that afternoon, dark clouds filled the sky again. Rain began to pour, and Peter slipped in the muddy path near the river. "Oh no!" Peter cried. Just then, the mouse and the birds rushed to help him. The birds pulled a long vine while the mouse guided Peter safely back to dry ground. Peter laughed with relief. "Today I learned something important," he said. "When you are kind to others, kindness always finds its way back to you." That evening, Peter returned home tired but happy. He told his family about his adventure, and they all agreed. A little kindness can make the whole world brighter. The next morning, Peter Rabbit woke up to the sweet smell of rain on the grass. Tiny drops still sparkled on the flowers outside his burrow, and the meadow looked fresh and bright after the storm. Peter stretched his paws and smiled. He could still remember how the birds and the little mouse had helped him near the river. Kindness truly travels in circles, Peter whispered to himself. After breakfast, Peter's mother handed him a small basket. "Peter," she said kindly, "would you take these blackberries to old Mrs. Hedgehog? She hasn't been feeling well." "I will," Peter replied cheerfully. Peter hopped down the winding forest path. Along the way, he noticed that the storm had left many branches and puddles across the trail. Some smaller animals were struggling to cross safely. Near the pond, Peter spotted two ducklings trying to reach their mother. "We can't get across," one duckling cried. "The mud is too slippery." Peter looked around carefully. Nearby lay a flat wooden board washed up by the rain. With a little effort, he dragged it over the puddle like a bridge. "There," Peter said proudly. "Walk slowly." The ducklings carefully crossed the board and reached their mother safely. "Thank you, Peter Rabbit," Mother Duck said warmly. "You always think of others." Peter felt happy inside, but he still had a long journey ahead. As he entered the deeper part of the forest, he heard loud grumbling noises. "Move aside." "No, you move." Behind two bushes, Peter found a squirrel and a badger arguing over a pile of acorns. "There aren't enough for both of us," shouted the squirrel. Peter stepped forward carefully. "Fighting won't solve anything," he said gently. "Maybe we can work together." The squirrel crossed his arms. "How?" Peter pointed toward the oak trees farther up the hill. After the storm, many acorns probably fell there. Instead of arguing over one pile, we can gather more together. The badger scratched his head. "That actually sounds smart." So the three animals climbed the hill together. Soon they discovered hundreds of acorns hidden beneath wet leaves. "There's enough for everyone," laughed the squirrel. The badger smiled at Peter. "You turned an argument into friendship." Peter continued on, his journey with a warm feeling in his heart. By afternoon, the sky grew cloudy again. Wind rustled through the trees, and the forest became darker. Peter quickened his pace toward Mrs. Hedgehog's house. But suddenly, crack, a tree branch snapped above him. Peter jumped back just in time, but he heard a frightened cry nearby. A young fox cub was trapped behind the fallen branch. "Please help me," the cub whimpered. Peter hesitated for a moment. Foxes sometimes chased rabbits, and the cub's sharp little teeth made Peter nervous. But then he remembered something his mother often said. Kindness should not depend on who someone is. Peter took a deep breath. "I'll help you," he said. The branch was far too heavy to move alone, so Peter raced through the forest calling for help. The squirrel came first, then the badger. Then the birds. Even the tiny mouse arrived. Together they pushed and tugged until the branch rolled aside. The fox cub scrambled free, shaking with fear. "Thank you," he whispered softly. "Most animals are afraid of foxes." Peter smiled kindly. "Everyone deserves help when they're in trouble." The fox cub lowered his head. "I'll never forget this." As evening arrived, the clouds finally cleared. Golden sunlight poured across the meadow, making the wet grass shine like jewels. Peter finally reached old Mrs. Hedgehog's little home beneath the hill. "You came all this way in the rain?" she asked kindly. Peter handed her the basket of berries. "And I made many new friends along the way," he added proudly. Mrs. Hedgehog smiled warmly. "You know, Peter, the strongest animals are not the fastest or biggest." "Who are they?" Peter asked. "The ones with the kindest hearts." Peter thought about the ducklings, the squirrel, the badger, and even the fox cub. He realized that every small act of kindness had brought animals together. That night, as stars twinkled above the meadow, Peter sat outside his burrow feeling peaceful and proud. And somewhere in the forest, many animals were smiling because one little rabbit had chosen kindness again and again. A few days passed, and the forest around Peter Rabbit became lively again after the storms. Flowers opened beneath the warm sunshine, bees buzzed happily through the meadow, and every morning the birds filled the air with cheerful songs. But one afternoon, something unusual happened. Peter was nibbling clover near the garden fence when he noticed animals hurrying nervously through the woods. "What's happening?" Peter asked. "The river is rising again," cried a rabbit from the hill. "The bridge near Willow Creek might collapse," shouted a squirrel. Peter's ears stood tall with worry. The wooden bridge over Willow Creek was very important. It connected the meadow to the berry fields, the pond, and the safer paths through the forest. Without it, many small animals would not be able to cross. Peter quickly ran toward the creek. When he arrived, he saw muddy water rushing wildly beneath the bridge. The old wooden planks creaked loudly each time the wind blew. Standing nearby was the fox cub Peter had helped days earlier. "The bridge won't last long," the cub said nervously. Many animals stood nearby whispering fearfully. "What will we do? How will we cross? We can't fix it before nightfall." Peter looked carefully at the bridge. One side had become loose because of the heavy rain. Then he had an idea. "We can repair it together," Peter announced. Some animals looked doubtful. "A rabbit can't fix a bridge," muttered an old mole. Peter smiled politely. "Maybe not alone," he replied. "But many friends can." The fox cub stepped forward first. "I'll help." Soon the squirrel arrived carrying vines. The badger brought strong sticks. The birds searched for twine and small branches. Even the tiny mouse gathered pebbles to steady the ground. Peter organized everyone carefully. "Birds, tie the loose ropes. Badger, hold the beam steady. Squirrel, bring more vines." The animals worked from afternoon until sunset. Slowly, the broken bridge began to look stronger. But just as they finished, crack, one of the middle planks suddenly broke apart. A frightened baby bunny standing nearby slipped and fell onto a narrow rock above the rushing water. "Help!" the bunny cried. The water below roared loudly. Everyone froze in fear. The rock was slippery, and the current was too dangerous. Peter's heart pounded. "We need a plan," he said calmly. The birds circled overhead while Peter studied the river. Then he noticed a long branch hanging from a tree above the creek. "If we swing the branch close enough," Peter said, "the bunny can grab it." "But who will climb out there?" asked the squirrel. Before anyone else could speak, the fox cub stepped forward bravely. "I will." Some animals gasped in surprise. The cub carefully climbed the leaning tree while Peter and the badger held the trunk steady below. Wind shook the branches, and water splashed loudly beneath them. "Be careful," shouted the mouse. Slowly, the fox cub pushed the branch closer and closer to the frightened bunny. "You can do it," Peter encouraged. The little bunny reached out trembling paws and grabbed the branch just in time. Cheers filled the forest as the fox cub carefully pulled the bunny to safety. The baby bunny hugged Peter tightly. "I was so scared," she whispered. "You were very brave," Peter said gently. The animals gathered around smiling proudly. For the first time, rabbits, foxes, squirrels, birds, badgers, and mice all stood together like one big family. That evening, they finished repairing the bridge completely. Lantern bugs glowed softly in the darkening forest while the creek flowed peacefully once again. To celebrate, the animals organized a meadow picnic under the stars. Mother Duck brought berries. The birds sang songs. The squirrel shared roasted acorns. Mrs. Hedgehog baked sweet root pies. Peter sat quietly for a moment, looking around at all the smiling faces. Not long ago, many of these animals barely trusted one another. Some were shy, some argued, and some were even afraid of each other. But kindness had slowly changed the forest. The fox cub sat beside Peter. "You know," he said softly, "before I met you, I thought being strong meant never needing anyone." Peter looked at the glowing creek. "My mother says true strength is helping others, even when it's difficult." The fox cub nodded thoughtfully. At the center of the meadow, the old mole suddenly stood up. "I was wrong earlier," he announced loudly. "One rabbit really can help fix a bridge." Everyone laughed warmly. Peter's cheeks turned pink with embarrassment. Then Mrs. Hedgehog smiled kindly and said, "No, Peter did something even greater." "What's that?" asked the bunny. "He fixed hearts too." The meadow became quiet for a moment as everyone thought about her words. Because it was true. Peter's kindness had brought courage to the fearful, friendship to strangers, and hope to the whole forest. As the moon rose high above the trees, Peter looked around at his friends and felt happier than ever before. And deep in his little rabbit heart, he understood something important. Kindness may seem small at first, but it can grow big enough to change an entire world.